Good afternoon, Neto. Again, thanks for such an amazing introduction, and thank you for having us on again.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's always incredible conversations with you when talking athletics, not just on the African continent, but globally. Let's talk about the banning issue, which I believe it is a great step where we're noticing a landscape of change with athletes in universities, notably in the USA, getting paid. And I'm just wondering how many decades is that going to take for the African continent to exercise the same method, because it's just good and it speaks to our topic of the day, where we're saying, is sport doing its part on the African continent in reducing poverty?
So thanks for that. So look, in a nutshell, for the past 3 years, the landscape of the United States platform where universities are involved made a seismic shift because, many of the athletes realized that, look, they were the gladiators, if I may use that terminology, in the sport, and were the ones that were making, the different universities to make millions of dollars from TV sponsorships and deals, etc. And basically, what happened is a few athletes decided to go to court, and in summary, the court case was won, and the NCAA institutions and universities have now decided, and according to the court judgment, that they have to start paying it's $20.5 million per university towards all the different sporting codes that are involved at the universities. So because of that shift, now there are more university scholarships available now for students. There's more funding available, and when kids are really, really talented, they also now have the opportunity to use their name, image, and likeness, and from getting sponsorship options as well from brands. So you find the big brands like Nike, Adidas, etc., have now begun to sign high school students as well as to sign university top athletes to big branding opportunities, because it's now the time where youngsters are getting paid in university. And as Worldwide Scholarships, we are at the front of that on the African continent, and working with international students as well from Europe and Asia, New Zealand and Australia, to help them to also get themselves linked up with these shifts and these opportunities that are now available for young athletes.
And looking at opportunities for athletes from the African continent from this big initiative, are we likely to see universities on the African continent go in the same direction? Because in Africa, there's always a big outcry when it comes to funding.
Neto, to be honest with you, Africa, sadly, and I don't know why, we are sadly always late to the game. And look, with us on the ground, basically putting these things together, I'm sure some of the African universities will wake up to the opportunity that is there. But remember that the landscape of African universities playing against each other in competitive sport is one that would then generate that kind of interest and that kind of brand need, if I can put it that way, for people to see the business opportunity in sponsoring athletes to compete university versus university. I think Varsity Cup have done a very good job in South Africa with that, but what needs to be done is literally an Africa-based league with universities competing on a consistent basis for this to make a lot of sense.
1600 Central African Time. If you have just joined us, a very warm welcome to Africa at Play. We are officially entering into the third and final hour of Africa at Play. We are in the middle of a hot athletics conversation with an athletics legend, a former athlete himself, Munya Maraire, and a CEO and founder of Worldwide Scholarships, also known as WWS. Mr. Maraire, talking about WWS, and we are also talking about action that is currently underway in Tokyo, Japan, at the World Athletics Championships. Who are some of the athletes from WWS that are representing the African continent at the Global Championships currently underway?
So, to be honest, few to zero of the athletes that are in the current national team are athletes that we have actually worked with as seniors, but many of them have gone through several of our junior programs. I know Wade Vanikak and Akani Simbini went to Jamaica, which is a relationship that was opened with Usain Bolt's club by Worldwide Scholarships many years ago. And I think that planted a seed. After that, Wade went on to break the world record, and Akani has never been the same again since that. Outside of that, we have just been a part of just developmental advising to several athletes.
Jamaica is very close to your heart, and not many of our listeners know why. Please tell us why.
My mother is Jamaican. Half of my family is from Jamaica. We were the reason why Bob Marley came to Africa for the liberation struggle in 1980 to Zimbabwe as well. My mom was the one that helped orchestrate that for the Zimbabwean government. Yeah.
And looking at the calendar of athletics on the African continent and globally, the WWS representatives, who are some of the athletes that are raising the flag high?
Look, right now you've got youngster Karabo Letebele, who has done incredible as a junior athlete, raising the flag of South Africa, as well as also doing some incredible things on the international level. He's someone we're very excited about going forward into the future, as he's now looking towards university scholarship opportunities, going to the United States of America. Another senior athlete who has turned his life around is Luvo Manyonga, who we've begun to help, a former world champion and Olympic silver medalist in the long jump. He will be doing some amazing things, we know, next year, as this year was more of getting him back into the swing of things. And we're also working in the world of football. We're also working in the world of field hockey, and looking for other athletes that are going to come through from the different areas of the continent. Currently, we're actually looking at running a continent-wide talent identification element, where we are going to bring together at least 4 corners of the continent, and we're going to this year run some talent identification events where we invite high school kids from all over in the different sports of soccer, basketball, athletics, field hockey, and basically look for the next trajectory of talent that we know is out there, and this needs again to be found and to be put through seasoned programs. We're also working with FIFA to bring international tournaments, obviously with the emphasis on women's football, and looking at how we can create more meaningful pathways for the youngsters of Africa, because right now it seems like every time an African athlete makes it, it's by chance or by mistake. And what we're going to do is ensure that we have very well mapped out pathways that go from grassroots level all the way to professional level.
16:04 Central African Time. We're still talking about athletics on the African continent and globally. Helping us to do so is the legend himself when it comes to athletics, Munya Maraire, who is also the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, and founder of Worldwide Scholarships, WWS. And this is an institution that works very closely with the Confederation of African Athletics in making certain that African talent does not go unnoticed. And he just touched on the talent identification program that is still happening across the African continent and still coming up in different sporting codes. Talent identification, Mr. Maraire, is heartwarming, especially looking at the African numbers when it comes to the ongoing World Athletics Championships, where we are not seeing a big contingent from the African continent if you break it down to different countries. But when you look at the USA, always on top of the things in terms of making certain that they bring big numbers in different disciplines. What is still lacking for Africa to take full advantage of the vast talent that we have on the African continent and go to these events with a big contingent to create more chances of podium finishes, but also more career opportunities for African athletes?
So Neto, I think in, in Africa we're in big trouble because the younger leaders are either in the shabins, or the older leaders are busy using the resources of the federations to travel the world and enjoy themselves. So we've got big problems, and part of the ethos and the direction of worldwide scholarships right now is that we want to ensure that we bring the corporate community behind these athletes to be able to ensure that you can match a deal that I mean Nike gives USA Athletics $100 million for 4 years in order for them to be able to develop athletes step by step. So you can imagine Africa doesn't even have that for the whole continent, let alone one country. So these are the things. Resource mobilization is very important to get behind the athletes, the resources needed to be able to help them to develop. Right now you've got a lot of well-wishers, you've got a lot of coaches that some of them work for free, helping athletes to get to the next level. And the more that we begin to understand that sports is business, and that not only is it business, but if it's a business, that means those that are making it work need to be remunerated and paid for their services. And this is what we need to do as Africa in order to be able to ensure that there are more people on the podium. Because when you find youngsters from the villages or from lower class families, they need to be supported. Immediately, the funding needs to be in place for them to eat, train, travel, get rehabilitated when they're injured, as well as for them to travel across overseas to get the opportunities. So this is where we are behind as the African continent. And look, we are on the ground as worldwide scholarships. We're going to make things happen as best we can in our little corners that we have, that we are involved in, and continue to make sure that the narrative is changed on the African continent, because we surely have the youngest continent, which means the next world champions, if not this year, are supposed to come from the African continent.
Indeed, greatness coming from the African continent and excellence is always welcomed. Talking about the challenges on the African continent, clearly 5 years is not enough to say 5 years later a lot will have changed, but perhaps it's safe to look at the end of a decade. What do you think the athletics on the African continent will look like a decade later from now?
Neto, it's actually interesting that you say. Look, it's interesting you say that because sports is a very interesting thing. It is not like other industries which need a decade. Literally, if you put the right infrastructures and the right people in place, things can happen very rapidly. Athletes can become world champions within 1 year of them being found, within 1 year of them being, trained, you know what I mean? So you just have to make sure you've got the right people on the ground. And within 5 years, things can supernaturally change. It can change, but again, it needs people on the ground that are motivated, that decide that they need to get behind these initiatives to make them happen.
Interesting indeed, and you're raising a very solid point, but also to my point is that 5 years ago I've had conversations on the admin disorders when it comes to sport on the African continent, and half a decade later we're still having those conversations because not the correct personnel is always placed in crucial positions to take athletics and sports in general to another level. But with the absence of WWS and many other stakeholders out there that are sharing the same vision, we remain optimistic that there will be rapid change. Before I say goodbye to you, your parting shot?
The parting shots for me would be, let's not give up on our motherland. We are on the ground, as we have said, and every year we are doing more. The bigger we get, the more we can do. And again, there needs to be a change in most of the leaderships that are across the continent in these federations. Luckily, I don't need them for my own sustenance, but many that do need them don't speak the truth and speak what needs to be said. Is that really there needs to be a seismic change in the different leaderships in order for us to be able to develop There are many young leaders that can do the job. And, this is me inspiring many of those young leaders who want to be presidents of different federations and associations, that they must step up and get involved, because Africa needs them, and Africa needs the youth to lead the youth.
And talking about